As a next presenter, I would like to invite the genome biologist at Cambridge from the United Kingdom, Professor Madan Thangavelu, and he will be speaking on about One Earth, One Health, World Order, AYUSH, for a stronger and resilient European Health Union.
Thank
Welcome.
you. I'm going to use my time as effectively as possible. Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Professor Spicek, for introducing. As your presentation was going on, I was exchanging a message with Harish Verma, who's on our presidium. And Harish ji has been treating ulcerative colitis patients for several decades now. And he uses one of the ingredients, he uses 3 ingredients, one of which is what Professor Spicek talked about, curcumin. But he also uses 2 other formulations. One is bale, leaves of bale, which is a very important medicinal plant. And the third one he uses is boswellia. So very deep anti-inflammatory properties. So these are all examples that are there in the field right now. There are ideas here who will be able to confirm how effective these treatments are. And it takes me into the title of my talk, which is One Earth, One Health, World Order. And the call for using the AYUSH systems for strengthening this, and strengthening what Europe is calling the European Health Union. And I just want to introduce, I'm not going to talk about genome biology, but I want to introduce a little bit about the European Health Union, and I want to show you how the European Health Union, the policymakers, the politicians, the people who provide the funds can benefit if they turn around and look at the Indian systems. So, am I controlling my slides? Yes. So, at the university, I'm based in Cambridge. I've been there for the last 4 decades. This is our clinical school at the university in Cambridge. And if you go to the entrance of this clinical school, as you go in, that's the entrance. As you go in, there is a portrait on one of the walls, and it's a portrait of our former Regius professor. And you can see written on the side of his portrait is a very interesting message. It says, medicine was now to prove the lineage as the mother of natural science and the truth of the saying of Hippocrates. To know the nature of man, one must know the nature of all things. And I think all our presentations today, in the past, in the future, will revolve around that one strong message. Man is a very complex system. If you really have to understand man, you have to understand the nature of everything that is in the universe. Whether it's art or whether it's music or whatever it is, there is an input that's going on. And we need to understand that. And that is what the Indian AYUSH systems are. A lot of people ask, what is AYUSH? And AYUSH is all about that interaction between man and the environment. In 2009, in Italy, we had an amazing event. Keep in mind, this is many years ago. We had this amazing event, and shown here, image of Professor Brian Josephson, one of our physics Nobel laureates. And he opened the event. And in his inaugural lecture, he was saying, Eastern philosophy and Western science consider the problem of objective reality that is very different. And Bruno here talked about quantum physics and understanding consciousness. And says reality is too complex to be reduced to a formula in general. We have to improvise. We don't know what this thing is, and we have to keep improvising. The details can be found in that paper there, and it's interesting reading, but you need to follow much more to understand the depth of this science. I'm not moving these things correctly. Is there I can do this with this, I guess. Is that working? On the bar. Which one? Sorry. Okay. No, it's not moving. Can somebody help? Martin? Apologies. Okay, try again. No. You need to take my time off here. Stop the clock. Okay. Let's go back. Okay, that's it. Was it working? Thank you, Martin. Okay, 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 it's working. Now, I've talked about the relationship, and to understand man, you need to understand the nature of everything. You can solve this problem in so many different ways. And you can solve this using a Chinese system, as a former speaker mentioned, or you can look around the world. And this was established, this has taken shape in form of a World Health Organization's Global Center for Traditional Medicine. So the World Health Organization is starting to recognize this, and the center is based in Gujarat. And there is still a lot of tension. You can read on the top of that slide there, mistrust of practice-based evidence, and by the so-called evidence-based proponents. And they like to call anything other than what is generated through their system as fraudulent science, unfortunate. And I don't know how to solve this. I'm not trying to solve it either. But what the organization has done, it has identified the 6 regions of the World Health Organization, and it's identified certain practices that are centered around those regions. So India will contribute yoga and Ayurveda, and you can see Africa contributes certain things, et cetera, et cetera. And within Europe, what Nora talked about earlier is naturopathy, homeopathy. It is being recognized as part of this. And there are areas here, Federico, that you touched on, which are very important for this whole year, other than the fact that you're also from Italy. And when we go into this whole area, we'll find that the first event, the first Congress, the summit took place just 3 weeks ago in Gandhinagar. There is a manifesto that has come out. And what I find in that manifesto is there are many gaps. We have identified the gaps. We've identified the stakeholders, and we are seeing the gaps that need to be filled. And that is the most important thing that's come out of this first meeting. So when we have more of these meetings, we will find a way to kind of bridge these gaps. Now, we've heard from our previous speakers that we cannot continue this dialogue, this idea, the strange idea of fighting disease. We cannot continue with it. You are missing out on many other things. What Federico mentioned about promoting health, very important. I divide this even more precisely by saying there is promoting health, which has a language and a grammar and a logic. There is something called maintaining health. You are a day older tomorrow. What have you done between today and tomorrow? That is maintaining health. Preventing disease. There are many practices that you have to take. And enabling novel cures. And this is the space where other traditional areas will come into play. Now, for many of you who don't know about the European Health Union, this is worth knowing. Familiarize yourself, especially if you're engaging with politicians and policymakers. Then it's valuable to visit this website, the European Health Union. Very new, but packed with information that changes on a daily basis. And they have identified 4 key action areas. Crisis preparedness, it's a political tool there, which is inspired by, I use the term inspired, it's a terrible term to use, but kicked into by COVID. There are many other crises in Europe. Obesity is a huge crisis. Katerina talked about it briefly. Inactivity is a huge crisis. Mental health is a huge crisis. Mental health is identified here. Beating cancer is something that has become politically acceptable across Europe, and the pharmaceutical legislation for Europe. People are feeling that pharmaceutical industry is going in a wrong direction, and it has to be handled politically. Look within the European Health Union page, this is what we find. Better protection of the health of our citizens, equipping the EU and its member states to better prevent and address future pandemics, improving Europe's resilience, and all the details are there. The lessons are learned from the coronavirus pandemic. Numbers, many of you should know, about 450 million people is what we are talking about in Europe. India, the world's largest population today, has 1,500 million people. The way these two groups will approach the problem of health and all the other indicators, health promotion, disease prevention, health maintenance, will all be different. But if we come together, we can learn a lot. Again, just a little more about the facts and figures. I think if we are talking about Europe, being in Europe, then we got to be up to speed with this. The most populated country in Europe is Germany. It has only under 90 million people. The single state of Uttar Pradesh in central part of India has 220 million people. And you can see how they will look at the problem of health very differently. Czech Republic has about 10 million people. New Delhi has about 25 million people. Bombay has the same similar number. So the way we look at, we use the same word, the same phrases, but the challenge is very different. Yesterday, when we were sitting here and discussing all of these things, Stella Kyriakidis, she's the commissioner for DG Santé. She was in Austria and presenting at the Austrian National Public Health Institute. It was celebrating its 50th anniversary. The Gesundheit Österreich, and she was presenting and introducing there the new concept, Next Generation EU. And it's a very important domain that's being presented. Katarina's presentation pointing us towards schools and school health and all of those things are packed into this whole area. And you will see within there on the left-hand side the major areas: make it green, make it digital, healthy, strong, equal. These are the key areas, these are the buzzwords. If you are not playing with these buzzwords, you are not resonating with Brussels. This is the key message here. And understand those buzzwords and see how you can interpret. And Katarina's work is sitting at the heart of this. There are many dialogues going on there in Brussels, in member states. Now, he says the Next Generation EU is more than a recovery plan. And the total amount of money that's allocated here, Federico, you will know about this and the struggle that you have in Brussels. It's about 900 billion. It's about under €1 trillion that is being allocated to this program. You are engaging in Brussels, you will be able to find out a little more about where this money is going, how it's allocated, etc. So it's wonderful that we are here talking about these things and examining these figures. And within for those who want to see, go into that Austria webpage, and you will see certain areas where there can be international engagement, there can be inter-country engagement, etc., etc. And I highlighted a few things here about the Center for Future Health Promotion. It's a very big area that is being discussed, how to make it happen. Or the Competence Center for Health Promotion and Healthcare. These are areas where there can be a dialogue between AYUSH systems and, sorry, what has happened here? Okay. Now, I touched on, in Horizon Europe, that one issue about the pharmaceutical industry, you know. And again, I want to put flagging these numbers here. Within Europe, we have a very large number of people who are employed in this pharmaceutical industry. And in discussions in Brussels, this matters. They are asking questions about, what about these jobs? If you're going to go with traditional medicine, what's going to happen to these jobs? And we must be sensitive to that area when we try and bring in Chinese medicine or the Indian systems of medicine. We must be sensitive to those areas. We are not saying we're going to lose all these jobs and they're all going to die on the streets. No, that's not what we are saying. We are saying we need to start thinking about how to recraft that narrative there. So these numbers will not go away because they are very old industries embedded deep within the ecosystem. And we have to find a language that is creative enough, exciting enough. You can see the amount of tax revenue that is coming from things that may or may not work. You can see the long list of the 10. These are the 10 best-selling drugs. There are a lot of biologicals there. They work, They don't work, but a lot of money has been invested into making these industries. Well, how to get out of this, I don't know, but it's there with us. We are celebrating the 70th anniversary of the discovery of the structure of DNA, and about the 10th, 12th year since the first human genome was sequenced. And so much has happened in that space. This is a paper that was published in May this year, the Human Pan-Genome Reference. And it tells us how every genome is different. There are enough changes, mutations in every genome that makes every genome different. Now, this, after all, is the knowledge that was given to us thousands of years ago in Ayurvedic texts, when it said every individual is unique, there are no two individuals are ever going to be alike, etc., and therefore you must be sensitive to the way you handle. Using the new techniques, we can look at extreme detail at the DNA of every individual. It's almost like a painting, like what Isabella showed us, you know. It's almost reached that point where the depth of the deepest part of science is almost like art. Beautiful colors, little alphabets. It's almost like a big painting you can put up on the wall somewhere, you know. And it's within this space we are trying to make a narrative. And shown here is a wonderful study that comes from the University of Edinburgh. It's been around for a long time now, relatively speaking. It is asking a very simple question, and they have provided the evidence, the papers are published, that simple saline water gargling and nasal irrigation, they call it nasal irrigation, which is only neti. Neti is an old procedure that is described in yoga. Just cleaning your nostrils, upper airway, and it gives you ability to prevent upper respiratory tract infection. That includes COVID, and there is evidence for it. How come we don't discuss this? We teach our children to brush their teeth. How come we can't teach them how to do gel neti? Stina Andersson is here from Sweden, Stina has 2 boys, and she does gel neti in Sweden. It's best practice in her house. The 2 boys, when they show symptoms of a cold, they do gel neti. So it is happening in families, but we are not able to make a policy out of this. So there is a problem here. There is information that is available, and as Professor Spisak says, there is information that's available, but it does not appear in databases. It's not respected, not curated. I come back to Austria. This is from MediUni Graz. There is information at the best university using microbiome techniques on how the microflora changes. And if we travel just a little bit further down, and they talk about how the microbiome affects the olfactory functions. If you go a little bit into Italy, I go now into Perugia, you will start to see another level of dimension. And this is from the Department of Medicine and Surgery at the University of Perugia. And they have given us evidence showing how the microflora changes, how there is dysbiosis. Professor Spisak showed dysbiosis in the intestine. Just like that, we have dysbiosis in our nasopharyngeal tract. And that gives us either susceptibility or immunity to viruses. And this data is already there. I don't know why it doesn't become part of our policy making. And I'm hoping people like Federico will take these kind of deep messages to discussions with the MEPs from Italy and other places. Now, for those interested in the biochemistry, you can look at where this biochemistry works. It affects the tryptophan pathway, and the tryptophan pathway is the main amino acid pathway that leads towards serotonin, melatonin. The part of the brain where the hypothalamus sits is very close to the olfactory response, the olfactory tissue, the mucosa, and you can generate inflammation. You can generate all kinds of imbalances in your macrophages that are residing in certain parts of the brain. And that is the start of inflammatory response that leads to all kinds of complications. In the Indian systems, this is what we use. We use a very simple oil, a very simple preparation, which has been used for thousands of years, anuthylam. And this is used routinely as a as a daily installation. It is recommended in the text in Ashtanga Hridaya. It says you can use it as a daily installation to provide you resistance to these viruses. Now, they have a selection of herbs. These are herbs available locally in the south of India. We may well have other herbs available in other parts of the world, but this is what is available. And the way in which it affects and gives you that response is no different from how you manage dysbiosis in the gut and how you can prevent autoinflammatory conditions in the gut. It's the same kind of logic that's at play. So there is a lot of information from thousands of years ago which is available to all, but somehow not used. So this is another major problem, which I talked about briefly, that Amarjitji and his colleagues are working with in London, using extracts from plants, and the trial is going on. And it's a citizen-driven study where GPs and general practitioners will all come together. The government is still reluctant to fund it, but something is happening at the level of the people, citizen-level work that's going on. It's such a complicated symptom, the whole problem, the syndrome, it's so syndromic. So many problems there that are different from individual to individual, and you have to treat every individual uniquely. Now, I've talked about Nasya, and when we look at a procedure that's been used for thousands of years, versus what are the discussions that are going in the European Parliament, we see a gap. What we are doing here is just a new drug delivery route, using your nasal mucosa as a drug delivery route, but the discussion that should happen in the Parliament is not happening. What's the answer? There could be many answers, but I'll leave it there. Now, when we go slightly more into what is normal in the Indian systems, but slightly esoteric, I touch upon this other aspect that might be a central way to controlling hypothalamic inflammation. And this is marma chikitsa. There are different marma points in the body, which correlates mostly to the Chinese acupuncture points, and how you can activate these and how you can generate valuable therapeutic outcomes. Just an example of the kind of marma points that are there on the face. We have Professor Sir here from Banaras Hindu University who mentioned very briefly in his talk how you can use these marma points to generate responses within the body, and how we can have a dialogue between the Chinese system and how we can generate interesting therapeutic outcomes, and how we can teach this to people to live healthier, happier lives. Now, India holds the presidency of the G20 nations, and later this month they'll be transferring the presidency to Brazil. And I want to do that political connection here between G20 presidency from India to Brazil. And we have a lot of action going on in Brazil, a place there, the systems of medicine that are there. And this is taking into a social problem, the prison life, and how in Brazil they are using yoga and massage as a way to help prisoners live better. There is a wonderful study from Italy where we see how mindfulness can be used for small children. The same protocol can be used in prisons. And this is just an example of how we can bring in kinds of thinking into new thinking from the old world into contemporary needs, and educating inmates about the possibilities of life. You know, it's a very constructive way. Isabel does this with painting, and she handles people with mental health problem, and showing that different people might have to be handled differently. When we go into yoga, there are discussions. This is from the World Health Organization, the M-Yoga app. It is available for anybody who wants to use this. You can get in there. You can find out about yoga. And for those who are interested in the science of yoga and how it can connect with reducing neuroinflammation, enabling better mental health, there are researchers. And I could go in on a whole 6-day lecture series on this whole process of how yoga works, but we will leave it here. There are enough studies going on in different places. And I want to, Federico, and I want to put Italy again on the spotlight, because Italy is doing a lot of wonderful things and has a historic connection with the Orient. It's a very old connection from the time of Marco Polo, etc. And here is one very, very exciting study that not many people know about. It's called the Sanskrit effect. And it came out of an India-Trento partnership for advanced research. And the study is a very simple study. They looked at people who are able to recite mantras and who can understand, who can remember vast textbooks, texts, you know, thousands and thousands of lines, who memorize these things. And they said, how do these people do this? And they used MRI to look at the brain structure of these things. And what do we find? You find some very interesting changes in the brain. And this was published as a very large, fascinating study in Nature. It talks about extensive long-term verbal memory training associated with brain plasticity. And that brain plasticity might actually be a good way to enable certain preventing of neurodegenerative diseases. All that's been mapped and all that study is available, but we don't discuss these things. We don't understand why not. Why not? Now, I dwell on this as I come to the last part, 4 minutes to go, plus a little more. Health is different from healthcare. I want people to take note of this one point. When we talk about health, Federico, health is different from healthcare. It came through very nicely in the Salus message, but we want to shout louder in Parliament. We want to bring more people by dissecting that one theme. Healthcare is different from health, and health means completely different. And India has providing leadership with its One Health agenda, where it's already taken on in the Department of Animal Husbandry. It's taken on this whole area of showing the link between animal health, human health, environmental health, plant health. And the way that concept of One Health is interpreted in Brussels might be different from the way it's interpreted in India, because the needs are different, the population is different, the environment is different. Where do we go with all of this? I make this very bold statement here. Health that was different from healthcare. Health is being held a prisoner and a hostage of healthcare. I don't want to elaborate on this, but I hope most of you will understand what I mean by this. Healthcare, as it's offered today, is holding health as a prisoner. We must learn how to break out of that. And that is the theme of this conference, health. And we need to break out of this. And most of all, how we understand the human body, it needs to change. And India is trying to do a lot of this. They call it AYUSH diplomacy, and it's trying to revive bringing these old information, bringing it out, and taking it out to people. Sidney Brenner, one of our rishis in Cambridge, who's no more, passed away, who told us about decoding the human DNA, the human genome. He would have said that, you know, if I look at Ayurveda and Ayush systems, maybe that is the new language I want. He used to say, I need to teach biologists another language. And I am paraphrasing his term by saying not only biologists, but also teachers, doctors, a new language. When systems and knowledge come together, as shown in these two systems, the top axis and the horizontal axis and the vertical axis, the bottom right-hand corner are many areas where there is no conflict between the two systems. The horizontal is area where we need dialogue, but for me, that exciting area is the top left-hand corner, where there is new knowledge to be gained. And that new knowledge can come from whoever is out there. The lesson we are left with remains the same. John Hewlins Jackson, he was one of our very important neurologists, founder of the journal called The Brain. John Hewlins Jackson, you'd say it takes 50 years to get a bad idea out of medicine, which is what we have. And it will take you at least 100 years to put a new idea back into medicine. What are the educational systems and opportunities we can have to find neutral ground? Here is an event that happened in Italy, in Sorrento, 2019. Clinical case reporting. Doesn't matter whether it comes to homeopathy, but if there is a tool that is there, this is from Italy, that tool can be taken anywhere to the world. It's a product that can be taken to anywhere in the world and enable new dialogues. As we approach what I call end of the fourth industrial revolution, globalization, the fifth industrial revolution, this is where we are. We're going to not be physically moving from place to place, but what is precious here is information. We want people in India, we want people in Africa to hear about the Salus project. We want people in India and Africa to learn, Katrina, about your project. We want people in India, Africa to learn, which Isabel is already doing, you know, about art, all the different things they do. So there's a language problem. You can listen to this talk of mine about the language paradox, which lives with us. This is a big problem. And in terms of communication, I love this statement from Professor Wolfgang Wagner. Wolfgang's daughter was sometime Minister of Health in Austria, and this is the father. The father makes a very wonderful comment here, that public discourse makes science more than, at the same time, less than a stripped-down version of the original. If you were to sit down with Charaka Samhita, this is what will happen. We cannot take that knowledge down to the people. Instead, the relationship between what will be offered to what people will get will be like the relationship between a hamburger and the fillet. So I leave it there. I thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Thangavelu, for shining the light onto so many issues and topics, and the preventative measures taken from your expertise. What an incredible contribution. Thank you.